All right, thank you everybody for joining us today for this special webinar. We're excited to present to you this webinar about acquiring a complete view of road weather hazards with the note on operating effectively, getting a complete view of the weather that impacts roads so you can operate more efficiently and effectively throughout your operations. We have a couple housekeeping items before we get started on introductions. This webinar first off, being recorded. So everyone is on mute. If you do have a question, feel free in the bottom right-hand corner of your side window there's an Ask Questions button. Feel free to send us your questions throughout the presentation. If we're able to work in the answer during the presentation, we certainly will. If not, at the very end of the webinar, we will give people a chance to unmute themselves or to raise their hands, or we'll go through the rest of the questions that were not answered throughout the webinar. With it being recorded, we're also going to send out that recording at the end of the webinar. So if you miss something and want to go back and look at it, or if there was someone that you know that was unable to attend, or even someone that might just be interested in what we're presenting today, feel free to send that recording on to them. We will also be posting this on various social media channels as well too. So be on the lookout for that. We also, at the very bottom, there should be a handouts section. We have a road weather buying guide that was recently released by High Sierra. It's a really great dive into road weather and the various solutions that are out there. Gets into a lot of the products that are out there, how those solutions can help you out, and gives a really great overview of the road weather solution guide. So if that's of interest to you, feel free to download that. I'll also remind people at the very end of that handout as well. So with that, we'll jump into our speakers today. First off, we have Brandon Terry. He's our RWIS sales director. And we'll get into the backgrounds in just a second. And also myself, my name is Charles Yost. I'm the product marketing manager for High Sierra, One Rain, and the rest of the advanced environmental monitoring business units. So a little background about Brandon. Brandon has been in this industry working in the weather space for the past 15 years. He's been leading both flood warning and road weather solutions across a variety of customer areas, from small municipality governments all the way up to federal and state DOTs. We're really excited to have him on today, and he brings a wealth of information about what we're going to be presenting today. And so he's going to be digging into one of our case studies that he helped to implement. A little background about myself. My name is Charles. I'm the product marketing manager. I help deliver solutions to the market, help bring our products and positioning out. I've been in the weather space since 2013. I got some advanced degrees in weather and rainfall, and really excited about our road weather presentation today. So just a little kind of agenda about what we're going to be covering. Again, we're kind of focusing on getting that complete hazard view for all the weather hazards that it might impact roads. So we'll start off with, just first off, why is road weather information important, and kind of overall road hazards overview. Might be preaching to the choir a little bit with those first two, but we think it's important to set that groundwork as we build off of that towards our complete road weather approach. And we'll get into some field technologies that help to enable that complete road weather approach. And then Brandon will take us home with a really in-depth dive on the city of Alexandria and the great work that they're doing out there. So when we think about weather that impacts roads, we can kind of divide it up into three kind of main categories. There's the economic side. Winter maintenance accounts for on average about 20% of DOT's annual budgets, and there's multiple billions of dollars that is lost from trucking companies alone. And not only to mention the amount of time that's lost from society being stuck in traffic. And so from a pure just number standpoint and budget standpoint, it has a humongous impact on municipalities and their ability to fight winter weather and operate more efficiently. There's a really big environmental impact, and we're going to spend some time kind of talking about this, and Brandon will touch on it. But because we're treating and maintaining these roads, there's a huge environmental draw. And so a lot of the one of the biggest sources of salt into wastewater and stormwater systems is directly from wintertime maintenance and activities. And so as we try to operate more efficiently to help reduce our economic impact by how much material we're using to treat, that's also directly related to what that environmental impact will be from runoff and from chloride levels being applied onto the roads. So a really big environmental impact that's directly tied to this. And finally is the societal impact, right? This is everything from accidents that might occur on the way home, during a winter storm, or even just the inconvenience of someone having to show up late to their work because of an unplowed road or an unplowed sidewalk and having to walk there. And then we get into the numbers of number of accidents and lives lost. And over 20% of the accidents, over 5 million accidents occur in the US alone annually. Over 20% of those are directly related to weather. And so, 1 in 5 accidents and injuries and fatalities are directly attributable to weather influenced conditions. So this is when we think about impacts of road weather, we're really hitting all the 3 categories, right? Economic, environmental, and societal. So what are those road weather hazards that we're talking about? The most common one is the one that's pictured here, and it's what everyone thinks of when we talk about road weather. So when we mention road weather, the average person, as well as the average municipality public works director, is thinking about winter weather operations. And that is everything from pavement state. What is the state as the winter storm moves through an area? Do we have a snow-packed road? Do we have frost and icy road conditions? Are we into more of a slush and wet scenarios? And the pavement temperature in coordination with precip helps to drive all of these road weather hazards. This is a very well-known and studied and budgeted area of road weather, and we're going to spend a little bit of time on this. But the other 2 areas that often, categories that I'm mentioning here often get overlooked throughout road weather hazard operations. The first one is flooding. Water on road and the water level has a huge impact on traffic throughput and road closures and overall efficiency of road networks to operate. And these can be from simple coastal flooding or nuisance flooding all the way to flooded roadways where we have swift water going over a road. And we'll talk about this in a lot more detail. The other categories when we talk about weather influenced hazards is precipitation, water on road, just simply rainfall that has fallen. That is the #1 cause of accidents here in the U.S. is just simply a wet or rain pavement, and leads to a large number of accidents and injuries annually. And then we have other areas that often get overlooked as well too, including visibility and wind speed, which can have really big impacts to how a system can operate, and the response of the municipality to go out and operate with that. And so when we think about these road weather hazards here, each one of these, while they might have some seasonality with this, depending on the part of the country that you're in, they all can occur and impact the roads and have the same or similar consequences for the road network that you're responsible for. And so what we're going to be talking a lot today is a combined road weather hazard system. And what this does is it's a combination of both software and hardware working in concert together to provide the most value. It's going to detect these weather hazards on the roads, and then be able to alert and to warn the appropriate people, whether that's the maintainers of the actual roads, whether it's other departments within your group, or ultimately the motorists. And we'll spend some time looking at that. These include things like winter weather sensors that we've come to know being able to detect that pavement state and temperature, but it also includes things like water level sensors, rainfall data, getting regional wind data so you can start to detect for approaching a high wind or low visibility area, and essential software that we're going to tie all that together with. Over on the right hand side, we're showing some screenshots of the city of Alexandria, Virginia's their combined road weather hazard system. And they've been implementing this over many years. They've had a very thoughtful and kind of deliberate approach to how they're tackling all this. And we're going to spend some time really diving into how they've attacked it and how their combined system has been really effective for them through the years. So, how can we get this complete weather hazard view? I mentioned we often just focus on the winter weather when we talk about road weather. Well, the first thing is we're actually not getting a complete winter weather view, and we'll spend some time talking about that. It's not just the number of hazards, but also getting a complete magnitude and spatial understanding of how a winter storm is unfolding, and then that way we can ultimately respond and operate efficiently. The second is understanding and tracking those non-winter hazards that I'm calling them, but that are just as deadly and has just as big of an impact on roads. And the last area is even extending that detection and that understanding and being able to alert the motorists and drivers on roads so they can alter their behavior. So the first one we're going to dig into is getting a complete winter weather story. The traditional approach or how the industry has gone about this for the last several decades has been through traditional pole mount ARWA stations. And what this does is it allows tracking of pavement state, has a full MET suite on it, and cameras to visually verify conditions. They're really accurate and reliable, and we can store that data and start to understand long-term trends with that. There's some problems with this approach, right? Where we miss what's going on between these stations. And when we look at a roadway system, you might at the most have a couple hundred of these stations, and we're talking thousands of miles of roadways and trying to make decisions off of just a couple hundred data points. And conditions and priorities change very fast when we're looking at winter weather and its impact on roads. And so the first way, this is just a pictorial diagram. You can see we have our two kind of traditional pole mount ARWA stations on a road segment here, and we have two data points that are recording maybe pavement temperature, let's just say. But the question is, what's going on between these two segments, between these two data points? You can see there's perhaps a dip in the road, and due to maybe environmental factors or not having power or road requirements, we're not able to get that data point right in the middle. And so when we're operating effectively and efficiently, we're putting motorists and the system into harm. And so what we want to do is get data points between that. And so the very best way to do that is to attach those same pavement sensors that can detect both what the pavement state is non-intrusively. We can put those on trucks, and we won't go through the full architecture, but we can connect this to the AVL system and to telemetry, so we can send out all of the information that's occurring between these stations as smartly as possible, and as well as sending additional vehicle information. And so a system that ends up with just those 2 data points, now we can get actual readings, road temperatures and pavement states between this. And this allows you to fill in those gaps. Plow operators can focus on the road instead of having to worry about transmitting road states. And you know, in this case, more data points equals better decision-making power. You can smartly understand how an event is unfolding across an area by looking at more than just single point data points. And these systems can be attached to not only plow trucks, but we can attach these to supervisor trucks, as well as non-road maintenance crew infrastructure. So buses and police cars and vehicles that are out on the road, no matter what the weather conditions are, to get that true understanding of what's going across the area. The other section that could help to fill in the gaps is ARWIS light stations. These are lower cost sensors and stations, package solutions that you can attach to existing infrastructure, and it removes the need for kind of the extensive requirements that we might have for those traditional pole mount systems. So it's the same data, but with less requirements. So we can deploy these quickly. Maybe we have a road segment that we're having trouble with, and we want to start getting data so we could proactively send people out to maintain the road. Or maybe we're in a construction area and we're having really bad problems with getting plows there effectively. So we can put these up in either temporary or permanent solutions. So we can help to get the kind of complete wintertime operations from the environmental sensor side, with mobile data and quick deploy ARWIS light or IoT sensors, in addition to our kind of traditional approach to wintertime operations. So the next area is understanding and tracking non-winter hazards. And when we look at this, we could see flood fatalities, and this is the flood fatalities over the last, from 2010 to 2018. And we can see this truly is a risk across all of the states in the continental United States. And of these fatalities that occur, over 2/3 of them occur with a driver in a car being swept off a road and having and losing their life due to them driving on the road. And in some years, it's even higher than that. And so for, you know, when we think about road weather hazards and getting that complete view, the risk from flooding is very real, and we need to be able to track that and proactively maintain those roads and warn the motorists as needed.
Hey Charles, I think even this year on in just 2020, I think there's like 40 deaths so far. We're just in August, right? And over 50% of those deaths, right, are vehicle related. So, you know, flooded roadways is definitely a big issue right now.
Yeah, and that's a great point. The state of Texas, you know, went through a terribly cold winter season where they had extreme temperatures on the winter side, and then they immediately went into flood season and having to quickly switch gears from a road maintenance and road weather perspective very quickly. And we'll talk about ways to get around that. So, you know, as I mentioned, on average, 68% of deaths occur in cars and trucks from water. And so what we can do is we can attach water level sensors at areas where we have known issues. So it could be low water crossings, like a picture shown here, where you know, we're not able to build infrastructure yet, like a bridge to help reduce water flowing on roads. Or it can be even just nuisance flooding, right? That shuts down roads where it isn't swift water. There's no potential for loss of life, but it could just be, you know, really localized urban flooding, or maybe coastal nuisance flooding, where we're just wanting to know what those water levels are so we can start to move resources as appropriately to close lanes or close roads, or even send that data on to commercial or private routing software to help to reduce the risk or chances of people driving into these flooded roadways. So water on road and water level is a really big impact, and this impact specifically kind of usually spans multiple departments. But we'll talk about ways we can help to enhance that and get a more effective solution. Rain and wet pavement is a really big deal, and when we look at the number of accidents that occur annually, this is the number 1 source of accidents in the United States is wet pavement. And we have this multitude and multiplying a problem with this is it can onset very quickly, and it could be very localized, or it could be really regional, and we can have the entire system stressed all at once. And so this can increase traffic and accident risks throughout the system. And so, really the best way to go about attacking this is through gridded rainfall data that's been corrected to rain gauge data, and looking at regional rain gauge data so we can start to see what's going on, maybe approaching us, or is there's new convective activity in your area, being able to pick that up, and then using what's called gauge adjusted radar rainfall to help fill in those gaps and understand when we're first getting water on pavement or wet pavement scenarios, and we could start to notify alert personnel to either lower have variable speed systems in place, or to update dynamic messaging signs throughout the system. And then the other hazards, including high winds and low visibility, these can tend to be regional and have known trouble areas. But again, these can develop really quickly, and oftentimes this has the stress of it occurring sometimes across the entire area, or sometimes just very locally on bridges or areas close to water or mountain regions. And so getting resources out there often can take take a certain amount of time to actually get the resources out there, close the lane safely, or close the road segment altogether. And so if we can automatically detect this and get notifications when we're heading towards a high wind event or a low visibility event from fog or smoke, we can start to get a head start on these, and as we'll talk about on the next slide here, actually start to notify drivers with flashing lights and with dynamic messaging. So the last way is kind of taking it full circle. The first two are about detection and being able to actively go out and operate efficiently with your system. The last way is proactively alerting and notifying drivers, because ultimately with all of this, we're wanting them to alter their behavior. That helps to slow down, or to maybe take a different route, or to not drive in one lane because there's water on the road. Alerting drivers to alter their behavior helps to reduce those numbers while we're in the process of operating and maintaining those roads. So as I mentioned, we can detect almost all of these environmental conditions, and we know when, for example, a road or frost conditions might occur on a road or a bridge deck, but maybe due to location or the speed or the risk to agency personnel, we might not be able to get out there quickly enough, and we need those drivers and motorists to know that, and to alter their speeds. And here's kind of a classic example of a snow frosted or snow-packed road, excuse me, where maybe this is a really remote bridge here, and it's a known trouble area, and just by having a sign that automatically turns on based on those road conditions is enough of a trigger to a motorist that, hey, I drive by this sign all the time and it's never on, and now I'm in this dangerous situation, I see those lights on, maybe I need to slow down. And so what icy road and icy bridge warning systems do, this is part of our driver warning systems industry category, is these are automated systems. They operate independent of humans. They can be overridden by humans, but for the most part, they operate autonomously, and they are constantly measuring the road temperature and pavement state, and based on whatever calculations or thresholds or conditions that you want to alarm on, they can automatically turn on flashers, blank out signs, or even close gates depending on the situation and what the need is. And obviously all this is going to be reporting back to the central software. We can also do the same thing as we're doing with winter weather and maybe an icy road or icy bridge deck scenarios. We can also do the exact same thing with water on road, right? So the same infrastructure, the same system, the same solution is delivering both wintertime warning as well as water on road and swift water issues. So in this case, we're measuring the water up to the road level. We can automatically track that, send that data back so we know to maybe we want to go verify, or we can put a camera on the system to visually inspect and verify. But ultimately, we're going to be warning the motorist by closing a gate if it's a known trouble area where we've had issues in the past, and turning on flashers to get that extra response. So as we talk about, increased detection on the amount of data for wintertime operations, getting that full detection of non-winter hazards, to understanding and responding quickly, and getting the most lead time or operational efficiency, and then warning motorists when those conditions are met. We kind of have to bring it all together. And so this is kind of that pitch for a combined hazard system, and which we'll talk about here in just a second with Brandon. But this gives us a single pane of glass view for all of these hazards, right? And what this does is it allows you to reduce costs, right? You're not operating multiple systems or software or telemetry fees. It's all in the same system. That helps to reduce the training time. If you're using the same system both in wintertime and wet weather, you're using it year round, and that helps. You're not having to re-gear up every year and to retrain the crew. You're continuing to use the same verbiage on alarms and the same access points, and all your bookmarks say the same. It helps to reduce the spin up time for whatever season you're going into. And it also allows you to quickly extend your deployment out. So, a lot of agencies are starting to see that, hey, I never had a water problem here before, but now I'm having it. You can quickly deploy resources and extend it based on how your needs are evolving over time. And the best way and kind of the end usage of this is having a central software that has all of it. And Brandon will spend some time talking about how the city of Alexandria has approached this, but it helps to have a unified notification system, same visualization and mapping, and to view both the mobile data and fixed data and non-winter weather data all in one spot, so you can respond effectively and warn motorists to alter their behavior. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brandon. I'll invite him to unmute, and he's going to talk and walk us through how the city of Alexandria approached this exact problem.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks, Charles, for the intro there earlier. Hey, lots of good stuff there that you went over. That's a lot of technology that we've covered, and some of the people on the call may have been familiar with that, but we always like to get a good picture and tell a good story. So, a lot of good picture of the big picture there. So how does all this stuff work together in the real world, right? How do we make sense of all the technologies to make decisions? We wanted to share a story of how the city of Alexandria, Virginia, has used environmental monitoring technology the past 7 or 8 years or so to really optimize how they are serving the citizens of their town. Like any other town that is, they're located there right outside of Washington, D.C., they're located above that proverbial snow line, right? Which, well, I mean, in the last couple of years, we've had to rethink the way that line's drawn, right? But anyways, they have their challenges of keeping the roads clear and business moving as usual and keeping the general public safe. So just as you previously mentioned, Charles, there's year-round weather conditions that are out there that are presenting challenges to the city. They have flooding, they have flash flooding, flooded roadways. In the wintertime, again, they have that window there where they get black ice. So in the springtime, really, they get periods where it doesn't look icy, but it actually is, right? And then snow removal effectiveness and how to do that efficiently and cost effectively. We'll kind of touch on that a little bit. They do get the fog of the Potomac, so that comes to effect around the city. Even lightning, lightning kind of plays a little bit into roadway stuff, maybe for roadway safety, but there's ways to monitor that. But the coastal and tidal flooding is a big influence of some of the stuff that we'll talk about, especially the wet weather hazards. So I think we'll kind of jump into the wet weather stuff. So a lot of water around Alexandria there, especially around the old city. When it comes to wet weather hazards, the city's environmental monitoring program, it was actually born from these types of challenges that the wet weather hazards present. The area has a ton of concrete and hard surfaces. It's lots of highways through there. So runoff is quite fast. This makes the area susceptible to having what you call a higher flash flood guidance than usual. Making flash flooding a very big threat. For those folks that may not know what flash flood guidance or FFG is, basically flash flood guidance is an estimate of amount of rainfall that's going to fall over a certain time period that may cause small streams to flood. I mean, that's how the National Weather Service defines it. These estimates are based on the current soil moisture, the soil type, and the current stream flow conditions for the area. Flash flood guidance is usually issued by the National Weather Service's river forecast centers, and is used by the weather forecast offices that are local to the area when they issue flash flood watches and warnings to the public. So anytime usually you're in an urban area, you're going to have less rain required to reduce a flash flood. So to kind of compound the problems, right? So we got coastal flooding too, right? So if the Chesapeake, say it's in a high tide or a king tide, and then the Potomac is a tidal basin influenced body of water, you get a double whammy, right? So it's like flooding on both sides of the equation. You may have a strong thunderstorm and a high tide, and then this in turn creates issues with flooded roadways. There's some really particular heavily traveled roads that have travel inhibited quite a bit when these events occur. The picture on the screen here is actually right outside of downtown Alexandria. It's the flooded roadway system. Basically, it was designed to notify motorists. We call them high water detection systems, or HWDS. The particular system that closes off this particular roadway is Eisenhower Avenue. Basically, it's a motorist notification with beacons, measures waterways on the camera and run, and lets the people know via beacons that it's flooding. So when this started taking place, they had some flood events in 2013. In 2014, they introduced the high water detection system on Eisenhower Avenue at Cameron Run. And data is measured there with a radar level water sensor. It's mounted on a bridge. And data from that system actually at that level, they share that data over with the folks in Metro. The Washington Metro group actually has a train yard right adjacent to this area. So when water level actually gets up into the roadways, we turn on lights, but we also have levels that we notify the people at the Metro that, hey, you might want to cut off some electricity or move trains due to the floodwater. So that's a neat little section there. Again, the flood warning system there in Alexandria was first put in as a project owned by the Emergency Management and the Fire Rescue Group. They were needing something to get out there to help prevent or mitigate having to go pluck people out of the water, right? Ray Watley, he's the emergency manager there currently in Alexandria. One of the main things that he really likes about the system is that he's able to close the roads in an automated manner without having to go have people, set up a fire truck or put out barriers or barricades. And this drastically helps reduce the amount of resources that he has to spend during an event when he could use his assets to go and maybe plug people out of water in places they don't yet have systems. So that's a big plus for him. Pays for the system, he says, in one rescue. Shortly after putting in those systems over on Eisenhower, they had some additional flooding that happened, and so they decided to get kind of a heads up. Let's supplement that system and find out what's coming down into the area. So they added up some additional sites up on Backlick Run and then up on Holmes Run. So those two bodies of water actually come together to form that Cameron Run. So having a proactive heads up of, hey, we're seeing a rapid water rise on those bodies, those little streams, that they can then anticipate maybe that road's going to close off, and maybe they can turn the roads on if it's a giant flash flood event. It's it's a really fast moving water. So so they added sites there. They also put in some flashers there around the Van Dorn roadway, and that works. It's just up the street from the picture you see on the screen here. They notify people that, hey, it's going to flood. Hopefully now that the system's in place, they're having a public site that's coming out. We'll talk about in a few minutes that they'll be able to put out notifications to folks that, hey, this water's coming up. If you live in the area, you can subscribe to that type of stuff and get your car out of the way in case it's going to flood in there. So it's a pretty cool feature that's coming down the road from those guys. Well, moving on down, they are hitting, the winter weather season coming up. It's just around the corner, right? So they have those challenges that they have to deal with. The city themselves, they're responsible for clearing the town's roads, not Virginia DOT. So these guys need as much information as possible to kind of handle those tasks, efficiently, and at the same time be cost effective, right? Charles talked earlier, about the environmental impacts, without the ability to measure sensors, measure the road with sensors and know when to get out and how effectively you are treating, you're going to continually put down additional chlorides and salt that may not be needed, as you have a very sufficient friction and condition going on, and then you won't have to have an additional cost of that environmental impact and additional cost on your resources. You can see on the screen here, there's a picture of a non-intrusive surface condition sensor there on the light pole. That's what we call the eyesight sensor. So it's a non-intrusive surface condition sensor. It's going to give you surface condition, pavement temperature, air temperature, relative humidity, dew point, a couple of good parameters to have there in weather, winter maintenance. So they put 5 of these guys in 2019. They stuck 5 of these around different areas of the city, some on bridges, some in areas that have some hills that they have some issues, like they have some stoplights on these hills, and they want to be able to make sure those are treated nicely to allow people to get plenty of time to stop with the red lights. Those are providing the friction values, again, that are super important for them to get out and treat. So, again, conversely, these sensors, not just for winter weather tasks, I was going to budge in on Charles earlier, but these things are great for slippery when wet, right? Because they can give you that the pavement's wet in the summertime, but it can also give you that friction value. So it's kind of a dual season type sensor, right? It's not just the winter weather that it's viewing, right? So you can get, hey, the surface friction has dropped down to like 0.4, maybe you get a little oil on the highway, it's just damp. So you can, activate, notifications on DMSs that, hey, slippery when wet, please slow down, be cautious. So for the group that's using the non-intrusive surface condition sensors, the Division of Roadways, we got Bob Garbax. He's the division chief there for transportation. And really, he's one of the big winners here, right? So he's getting all the information he needs from both the winter weather hazards and the wet weather hazards, and used to having to like send folks out. So they, for a while, they were sending folks out. They would use their trucks. They'd stick their arm out the window with a laser thermometer. I was talking to some of the public works guys, and they no longer have to really do that, right? They're getting a comprehensive picture of surface temperature from their sensors. And even during the wet weather events, right? He is saving resources, because in the past they used to have to go out and look at water on an hourly basis just to kind of decide if they're going to shut a road off or not. And now it's all automated, so those resources are freed up. So he's getting a pretty good investment on his return for what he's put in there in the city. Okay, so jumping back over to the wet weather hazards. Obviously, Alexandria, they do have some winter problems, but they do have huge wet weather issues that go on there. There was a very significant storm or rain event back in September of 2020 that caused some pretty extreme flash flooding within a couple of watersheds around the city. In a late September meeting after this event, in the city council meeting, Mayor Wilson said the city is too late to prevent the problems. Unfortunately, when people come to testify at these hearings or these council meetings, it's basically our capital infrastructure's failed. So it's like, it's 10 to 15 years too late for the city to be making any kind of preventative investments for those concerns. So, these unusual type of storms, these very intense storms are happening much more frequently. That he's telling the council that, we've got to figure out a way to be able to measure those, right? This is how do we make the kinds of investments in our infrastructure to be able to monitor and notify people when these events are happening or could happen and ongoing. And the challenges are happening all across the city. So they've had a pretty big push to be able to begin mitigating these type of events. He says that his residents are expecting it, they're demanding it, and this is one of the most basic services that they can provide to the community. Alexandria's infrastructure actually is only designed to handle a 10-year type storm event, or a rain event such a volume that, like, okay, so we say 10 years, people are like, well, this happens only once in 10 years, right? Well, it's actually more of a probability, right? So it's a rain event of such volume that it only has maybe a 1 in 10 chance of happening in any given year. That's what a 10-year event mark means. Over the past 14 months, Alexandria has actually had 3 storms that have significantly passed the 10-year mark. I think for Alexandria, their 10-year storm event is a storm that actually drops a little over 2¼ inches of rain in an hour, or it's a little over 4¾ inches for a 24-hour period. So, how do they monitor these types of events, right? So you can kind of see hanging out in the timeline there as we're progressing here. There's a precipitation and a water level monitoring gauge there. And the city recently, just this year, added 8 additional water level and precip gauges and a public web interface to inform citizens about flooding. So that's a really recent thing that's happened. It's still in progress, and we're helping them get that out and publish to the public. So it's a work in progress. So these sensors that they've put out there have become super beneficial when it comes to capturing some rainfall, right? These additional stations have allowed them to become even better in their rain data collection and in their flood warning resiliency. And additionally to the rain gauges, so if you remember the heat map that we just looked at, there's some rain gauges on the screen there that you can see have been placed in those locations where previously there weren't sensors, right? All the sensors were located on the western side of town, up around Holmes Run Parkway and places like that. So the rain gauge, density wasn't very good in the town. So they actually went twofold on this and went all in. They added additional rain gauges, they added stream gauges, but they also added in gauge adjusted radar rainfall that Charles talked about earlier. And that basically they're doing rainfall basin averaging and forecasting, right, to get a better picture of how the watersheds are performing during these events. We're talking about how we're going to say out 2 hours out from an event, we've had some pretty intense thunderstorms. We've had a little break here, but in looking at the forecast that could come in the next 2 hours, they can share that data out that the stormwater group has put in out with the emergency management division. And they can also share it out to the transportation group. So they can have advanced warning to impending heavy precipitation that's going to exacerbate what's already going. So they're they're adding stuff from different divisions, but it's helping out everybody across the whole collective good. Brian Rawl is actually the guy who has helping lead the charge on this adding of stormwater gauges. He is a big proponent of using the gauge adjusted radar rainfall to manage understand what's falling across the entire city at a glance. It provides reports and things like that. He works for, he's in the public works, but he's in the Department of the Environment. So they do a lot of reports specific to that. His group, they did pay for the infrastructure upgrades of their existing flood warning system that was on an old technology called Alert. And folks on the call here that's in the road weather world may not be familiar with what Alert is. Alert was a protocol that was developed back in the late 70s that was to develop a sensor that could report in real time. Well, the old system, if you had a real heavy event, you could possibly have what you call data collisions. So the city wanted to be more robust. They upgraded to the new technology called Alert 2, and what that does is it allows all the gauges to be on GPS-based time. They're synced up. They can send engineering units. It's a really robust protocol that operates over VHF, so you're not susceptible to rain fade like satellite systems. So they use this VHF type system, right? And it's really robust. And they get error correction. So they're getting 99.9% of the data that happens in an event. So that's a huge upgrade over what they had. The system is really real time. So when this system happens to get a trip in the field, with less than 5 seconds, that data is going to be in their database. So they're getting that almost a real-time situational awareness of what's going on from the weather sensors and the precipitation network, so which is really cool. And this can be used, the GAR product that we talked about, gathered from this system, can be used to trigger emergency crews, and road people in the events that could possibly close roadways and whatnot. So again, we're kind of jumping back on this slide that we saw earlier. Again, Charles we picked these shots up off of their system. They have that combined weather system, right? It's a huge team effort where the stormwater division of public works is working with the road department of public works, and then the emergency management folks are all in concert together, and it's a very harmonic system. And they're using that central software, as that magic piece that allows them to be in harmony in their decision making, right? They've got a ton of data coming in from different systems, and they're able to look at it, mobile based or in the traffic management centers, and make those decisions that helps serve the public the best, right? They've got a total thing, right? They've got winter weather sensors, they've got water level sensors, rain sensors, rain gauges. They're even pulling in data for the system from the USGS. So there's other systems that they don't even own that they can get data from. Even their neighboring networks like Fairfax County, they have a similar type of network. They can actually take the data from the bigger network that's to their west and northwest and pull that data in to help see or foresee what's coming their way to make decisions. So having the central collection software is one of the main pieces of that puzzle to allow that complete solution to work in Alexandria. So that's going to wrap it up for the Alexandria case study. You can see they're continually progressing and adding and trying to do what's best for the public there, and kudos off to them. I think now we'll move it over kind of to the takeaways and let Charles take us home on those, and then we'll kind of open it up for questions.
Okay, thank you, Brandon. And just as Brandon mentioned, we're going to open it up and answer some questions. Wanted to leave some time for everyone to get their questions in. There is a little bit of a lag, so go ahead and while I'm going through the takeaways, please send in your questions, send them through the questions box or the chat box, and then that way we have our questions ready for the final section here. So from takeaways, these are pretty obvious, and they're just kind of help to summarize what we've been working on here. So getting more winter data in more locations, and then you're quickly changing things around to either changing priorities or evolving road systems helps to drive better and faster decisions. So when we're talking about the impacts from roads, both economically, socially, or environmentally. We want to be able to be smart about how we're maintaining and treating our roads and deploying our resources. And the first thing is by getting more data and being able to be flexible in that data with where and how we're getting that information. The second kind of main takeaway is through alerting drivers of those adverse conditions. We're not going to be able to get out there and be able to get to every single trouble location, especially in areas that have a large geographic spread or areas that have multiple troubled areas. So having systems that work autonomously and independent of a human, waking up at 2 a.m. to go close a lane or close a road. Driver warning systems can help to alter that behavior so people don't drive through flooded roadways or they slow their speed for a icy bridge deck, in the middle of a winter storm that they're driving through. And not forgetting about these non-winter hazards. These are key. And when we look at number of accidents and even loss of life that a region might experience, a lot of it comes from these non-winter hazards. Road weather, is rightfully focused, on reducing those impacts in the winter weather season. But we do have a lot of non-winter hazards that occur, and these things can be seasonal and can occur independent of each other. But it truly is a year-round issue of reducing the risk and increasing public safety for everything outside of just wintertime weather.
And if you think about it, Charles, some of the biggest wrecks you've seen on the news lately have been some of those visibility based wrecks where you have, multitudes of pileups on the interstate that ends up with a chain reaction type rear end event. And those can be quite devastating, as we've seen the last year or two. Actually, there's been a couple.
That's exactly right. And the last kind of key takeaway, and then I have one or two other ones as we wait for questions to trickle in here, is a central software that helps to bring all of this together, right? You can have these systems, and that's great, but being able to pull it all into one system really helps to kind of elevate the effectiveness and how you respond and work through these hazards. It offers you a single pane of glass view that helps to reduce costs, reduce the amount of training that has to go into both maintaining and operating these systems, and allows flexibility in how you deploy and respond to your changing risk environment. And Brandon mentioned this earlier, but we're starting to see events and hazards occur in parts of the country that just are not used to seeing that. And so having a single system that combines all these hazards into one platform allows you to, as things are evolving in the years to come, to be able to respond and deploy to those changing hazards over time. And the other key part of that too is being able to switch quickly back and forth. Within a month or two span, Texas had freezing cold temperatures, deadly low temperatures, icy road conditions and snowfall, and then immediately went into drought and then into flooding scenarios for their roads and low water crossings. So it's not only just seeing new hazards, it's the speed changing between these hazards is really critical. And so having a common solution allows you to go from a low visibility event to a flooding event without skipping a beat.
Well,
I haven't seen
any questions come in. Don't be bashful, folks. We'll be glad to. We've got a few minutes here. We'd be glad to answer anything you guys have on this content. So please shoot us. If you don't want to answer a question here now, here's our emails. Give us an email. We'll be glad to get back with you and answer any questions that you have in regards to what maybe the city of Alexandria is doing, or maybe how we can get you and going with some complete weather monitoring tech.
That's perfect, and it doesn't it does look like we have one question came in asking about, does the system receive push updates, automatic updates on how the system is running? Um, so that's a great question, and I'll give a first pass at it, and I can let Brandon take a swing at it. So your question is exactly right, and it's something we kind of skipped over, but is important when you're thinking about designing these systems, is being able to maintain them to ensure that they work correctly in the future, especially when you're driving mission critical decisions off of this. It's not just about applying the right amount of material. Once you start getting into flooding and icy road situations, you're really making critical decisions and warning. So both pushing updates and notifying the correct personnel about how the event is unfolding, but also you need a system that can detect if there's a problem with the hardware or these systems. These are real world systems out there. Especially in wintertime operations, they can get dirty very easily, and you can start to get some spurious data. And so having a system, both hardware and software, that can detect when something is wrong and notify you, or be able to detect a trend that something is not working. And what that does is it helps to reduce the downtime of these systems from a maintenance perspective. You can proactively get out there, fix the issue, or replace it, or at a minimum turn it off so you're not making or not making the correct decisions for those. And so tech support is kind of up to the agency. You could do it in-house, or there's third-party providers, including High Sierra Electronics, that does exactly that can come out and maintain those stations, both either one-time maintenance trips or an annual contract for continual maintenance to make sure your system is operating year-round.
Yeah.
Brandon, did I miss anything?
No, you hit it all. I think, the central software, of course, all your software, that stuff's vetted and tested, and then it's pushed out at a certain time during the month. So their central software is going to be, updated automatically. Out in the field, again, we run diagnostic tests. We have heartbeat signals that come in from these systems that give us a diagnostic on what's going on a daily basis. So you do, like, Charles mentioned on the maintenance, we get that daily report of what's going on in the network. So if we have to get out there and fix something, we can. So that's it's kind of twofold. Some of the stuff that's out in the field is VHF based, so it's kind of hard to send updates that way. We do have stuff that is cell connected, so you can send updates and do some stuff that way. It's a mixed bag, but yeah, it's really easy to get reports out to know what's going on, and then do the annual maintenance. You got to keep this stuff clean to work, as Charles said. So if it's not clean or it's not maintained, you're not going to get the best data possible. So
the other thing I'll mention, and it's kind of slightly related to that, is on the design of these types of systems. Brandon walked through the city of Alexandria. This was a multi-year process, and it was primarily driven by the hazards that they were facing and what their priorities were, especially from kind of the upper leadership from the mayor's office down. But depending on your location and what your hazards are, and maybe how they unfold and how your environment changes that, can really drive how these systems are implemented, both from a priority perspective, but also how the technology is designed and implemented out in the field. We have a wide variety of sensors and telemetry and deployment options as we kind of walk through. And whether you implement a system with gates or flashers, or what type of water level sensor, or what type of road sensor you're using, or whether you're using fixed, mobile, or light, or how you deploy those, or especially in areas that can have both remote and tough geographic features, having a kind of clear plan also helps to, you can design it so you can extend it over time, but also design it to where you have a lot less impact from impact to maintenance. So that's really critical. An important design can help both on the kind of budgetary and admin side, but also helps reduce the amount of maintenance trips and to ensure the system works, no matter whether you're in a major flooding event or a major ice event. Having the system work through that is really critical.
Well, I think so. That brings us to the top of the hour. That was the only question that got typed in. Please, if you have any other questions, you see our email addresses right there on the screen. Shoot us a note, shoot us a question. We'll be glad to get back with you. We want to thank everybody for taking an hour out of your day to come join with us, learn a little bit. Seeing what other folks are doing is always a good way to kind of get an idea of maybe what you want to do in your town. So really appreciate your time today. Also, please, if you haven't grabbed it yet, please grab the road weather buying guide PDF there in the handout section in the bottom of the window there. I'll be glad to answer any questions you have going through that as well. So thanks everybody. Hope to see you guys on our next webinar. Thanks.